Are you working on your author career but struggling to get that first book published? Does the goal of being an author seem too lofty? Or thoughts of having multiple books and making a full-time living are as fantastical as living in Cinderella's castle? Welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where aspiring authors can be heard. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have gotten their foot on the author career path. Hear what they've done to get there and where they want to go now. Settle back. It's time for a bit of inspiration and advice. Come listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Right, so let's get into the new year. It's January, a whole brand new year of writing, and lots of people get into the mindset of fresh start and all that. So what is going on in the author publishing world that you've seen that's a good thing to bring up and talk about with this whole brand new year here?
I think one thing that's really good to bring up is don't pretend to die and as a way to boost your sales and then come back as if everything was cool with pretending to die.
I don't know that story. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. An author, a romance novelist, pretended to die 2 years ago. The worst thing is she pretended to have committed suicide, which was super dark, right?
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. And then 2 years later, she's like, hey, surprise, I'm back. I didn't really die.
Maybe she's a vampire.
Maybe. But she, her family, or her pretending to be her family, continued to get her Facebook group going throughout the last 2 years, as if, there's even heartfelt messages from her sister. Sometimes I just call her cell phone just to hear her voice because I know I'll never hear it again.
Well, now that's really going over the top. And that probably hurt more than helped her, I'm sure.
Yeah. So at first it was just a bunch of authors talking on Twitter about it. And then the USA Today picked it up, and then all these other big news outlets picked it up. So I'm guessing money was raised to, on her behalf. There could be some legal ramifications here.
Yeah.
Not to mention a lot of bad will. What a horrible thing to do.
Yeah. The old adage, any publicity is good publicity, doesn't work unless you're a grungy rock and roll band,
No, that's true. Very
true. That reminds me of another story I heard just a while back that I think it was a romance author in England, won some big writing award. And when they had the award ceremony, turned out it wasn't a 30-year-old female like the bio and stuff said. It was two 60-year-old guys who had collaborated to write these romance with the specific purpose of winning awards and being big. And people were offended and shocked and stuff. And it's well, people have been writing under a pseudonym for a long time, but to go that extra step and create the character, I think is really
persona.
Yeah.
I think for that, I do remember that two Italian guys who did this, and I think the problem with what they did was that they pretended to be this person, even in not in Zoom interviews, obviously, but email interviews. The not journalists would email them questions, and they would answer as if they were this 30-year-old woman, pretending to be this 30-year-old woman and giving a 30-year-old woman style advice, which is this totally ridiculous. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to have a pen name and your pen name has a persona, either make it clear that it's a persona,
right,
or don't do the persona. I don't know if you have a pen name. I don't have a pen name at this moment, but I have a lot of friends who do, and they're you can go to their primary website and you can say, hey, I also write as this, or or I have another friend who's got a secret pen name, but it's just super minimal on her author page and her website. It doesn't it makes up a little bit of a story. I like it, but it's basically the same stuff that would be about her, but she's not pretending to be something dramatically different than what she is. And she's certainly not going around giving advice.
Right. There was an author I just interviewed for the podcast. I'm not going to give out names and stuff, but the last name was extremely unique and difficult to pronounce looking at it. So I'm thinking, wow, I can imagine people looking for this author would have a rough time. That's the perfect reason to have a pen name, but
Yeah.
as you, and you can have 3 or 4 pen names again, as you. I've got 2, but they're both variations of my real name. So it's not going outside the realms and the bond, it's very close, because I like here, I use S.A. Schneider, and, I can also use Steven Schneider or some combination with my middle name and all sorts of stuff. So it separates them. And even if I created something else, MT Bass, well, I can't use that. That's an actual author I know. Let's say J.R. Diggers, but it's
he's
just
good.
the pen name, so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So what else is going on?
Did we talk about Brandon Sanderson last week?
No, I don't. Doesn't ring a bell.
So I think this is good news. This is a good news one, right? And so Brandon Sanderson, we all know that, he had a couple of Kickstarters the last couple of years, done really well. It's traditionally been a traditional published author, but he's kind of branching out via Kickstarter into doing some indie stuff, right? Like we can do. Maybe not $41 million like we could
right.
do, but
the possibility exists, but it's probably not the reality.
Yes, but we could all do a Kickstarter at one level or another and probably be somewhat successful with it. But one of the things that he did was he decided he learned that Audible has not been treating authors well, right? Both, I don't know how much in depth. He didn't talk about the returns or anything like that, or the non-payment or anything like that. He just talked about the very, very low percentage that Audible pays authors in royalties for their books. How super low it is compared to other digital products. And that was for being exclusive to them.
Right.
And then he said, and it's even worse. So if you're not aware, if you don't have an audiobook, you're not in there. If you're on Audible, you get 40% if you're exclusive. If you agree to be Audible exclusive,
right,
you get 40%. And now that's 40% of what it's sold for minus all of the fees and things like that. So it's not just, if your book's $20, you don't just get $8, right? It's going to be, minus the fees, which is like 40, it gets down to, it's going to be like $2 or $3, right?
Right.
And if you're not exclusive, meaning you can go through, use like a distributor, like Findaway Voices, you can be on, Barnes and Noble, audiobook platforms, all the different audio, whatever they,
Chirp
Kobo,
and
right? Kobo, which is my favorite one to get my audiobooks from. They, Audible will then only pay you 25% for books sold on them,
right,
through Audible or on Amazon, which is very low. So he decided that he was going to take a stand and say, I'm not going to put my books on Audible at all. These new books, like he came out with these new books for his last Kickstarter, audiobooks for them, and he promised them to his readers or listeners in this case, right? And he said, I'm not going to do Audible. I'm going to give you the books through other ways, but they're not going to be on Audible because I want to send a message to Amazon that they can't treat authors that way. He goes, and unless people with my level, I'm putting words in his mouth, but he basically said, with less people who have my kind of platform start to talk about this stuff, nothing will change.
Nothing right.
Will change. Yeah. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. I don't know that it's going to have like the effect that I hope it has, but it's the first step.
I was going to say, it's like a snowball, right? You got to have somebody like that can really get the notice and make the difference. So then people start paying attention. It's that old adage, how many orange Fords are there on the road? Well, not many. Well, now I'm finding orange Fords all over the place because you're paying attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Same here. If someone big like that gets the word out, people start thinking about it, paying attention. And there's a lot of people out there that are like, well, that's not right. I want to support these authors because I want them to write more stuff I enjoy. And he's a big enough name that it makes a difference. I mean, we've talked about Brandon Sanderson and other things before. So, there's a man to kind of admire, honor, go buy some of his books, even if you give him some of his a present, support the guy. I know he doesn't need the support as much, but he's doing things for others.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And, it's like big name authors, no other big name authors, and other big name authors listen to what other big name authors do and watch and listen. It's like we saw Stephen King stand up for authors during the Simon and Schuster Penguin Random House
Yep.
trial, right?
Yep.
So that was that's a first step. Like you see somebody like that do it, and other authors can become braver in the
Right.
process, right?
Yep.
You see Brandon Sanderson do this, maybe like maybe Nora Roberts will like go, you know what? I could do a Kickstarter too. And I could also not put my books on Amazon, right?
Right.
And then people are going to say, wow, that's Amazon's going to say, I really want those. And then the more people who have books, it's not the fact that they're not on Amazon that's the problem, because that's a drop in the bucket, right?
Right.
The thing is that when they're not on Amazon, super fans of Nora Roberts or Brandon Sanderson, Stephen King, Neil Gaiman will go other places to get those books. Like regular people might not, right? Like not super fans might not, but the super fans will. And that's going to start driving the process, if you can we were talking on a different, on a news podcast recently about this. And the hardest part for a service to get is the first customer, not the first customer, but the first purchase from a customer. Like I knew about Kobo audiobooks for a long time, but the first time you do it, you have to sign up. You got to put in your credit card. You got to do all these things. You have to mentally work through like, what is the process going to be for me to get my audiobooks in the future. But as soon as I did that first one, as soon as I learned the app, and as soon as I learned how to search properly in Kobo, I'm like, oh, now I can get all of my audiobooks from Kobo. And now it's a no-brainer. Now I don't have a problem. So getting somebody to buy that first thing from another platform is huge. And that's what Brandon Sanderson is going to be doing for a lot of people.
And I love that. This is a great opportunity for like Findaway and BookFunnel for their audiobook services to, hey, yeah. you heard about this? Take a look at what we got. And I did also hear recently that Google now is putting audio with AI, that you can choose AI voices and have like multicast performances of your book. And I think it was on one of Joanna's podcasts. I haven't looked into it myself. Have you heard about that yet?
I'd heard about the rumor of the multicast ones. I don't know. I haven't tried it. My books, the published books, I'm writing urban fantasy, but I don't have them published yet. So like my books are nonfiction, and like I'm the cast member, it's just me. I did test it, Google's. So I have one book on Google Play, because most of my books have charts and graphics and exercises, and it's like they're not very good for an audiobook. But I have one that's just called the Real Food Reset, and it's a book about how to eat better and things like that. And I think it did pretty well. Like I didn't have it in me to do the recording, and so as a test, I tried it. It took about an hour to get it done, to go through it, and it works pretty well. It's definitely not as good as a real narrator would do. But,
there's that thing, though. Some things, possibly nonfiction might be the thing that where's the point where it matters to readers? If the audio quality is a little bit less, but they enjoy the story or they enjoy the book, does it matter to them? And at what point does it say, okay, now this sounds horrible, I don't want to listen to it? So I guess this is where it's starting to kind of come around. If somebody says, wow, I can get that audio book, it's a little bit cheaper, but it's a robot voice or something, that's what I want to do. Or, whatever the reasoning is. I would love to test it, because I'm also a tech guy. So I get kind of torn. I want to support audio narrators, but I also like the tech aspect of it and be able to talk about tech and all that.
Yeah. I think there could be a market for to have both. Like as an example, I wanted to get a Neil Gaiman book the other day, and I went on Kobo and searched it. And there's 3 different versions of the book. One, it's a much older version. Then there's a newer version that has a full cast, right? So like 3 or 4 people doing it. And then another version came out at the same time, which is just traditionally narrated by one professional narrator. And so there's a market for different. I prefer just the one narrator. I don't want like the full cast ones.
Right.
So I chose that. But similarly, I got a Neil Gaiman book last year before Sandman came out on Netflix. And there were two different versions of that too. There was a full cast and crew kind of a version, and then there was one that was just traditionally narrated. And I got that one. I got the full cast one to see what that experience was like. And it was still pretty good. But so I can definitely see like especially for nonfiction, like having a cheaper version for people who just want to get the data, and then they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the difference between someone like me, maybe have a 3 or 4 book series, to put all of those into audio is going to be a huge expenditure that I may not even cover with sales for quite a while. So it doesn't even exist. But if I could put them in this Google AI and get all 4 books out, and if it's almost like a Kickstarter, if people are interested and get the book to listen to it, well, now I do have the money. I can hire a narrator. There's that possibility too. If I don't like necessarily the AI, but it's a good way to get it going. Proof of concept almost.
Yeah. And with Joanna also talked about licensing her voice.
Yes.
Right? And so that's another way. So she narrates her own audiobooks, or at least her own nonfiction, right? But she's also talked about licensing her voice. And some of the audiobook narrators I know have very distinctive voices, and they've decided that they've licensed their voice. So if Apple just started doing AI narration, Google Plus, there's a couple of companies that do AI narration that are in theory on a more professional, like maybe one step above the free ones that you get, and you can choose real voices that have been digitized and using AI. So
yeah, and I know James Earl Jones just signed over the rights for Disney Lucasfilm to use his voice for any future Darth Vader. So
yeah,
we could have 20, 30 more years of James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. I was talking to a friend about this with the deep fakes and the AI. One of the things I heard about with the deep fake AI voices is a good application of it is when you get a film that's foreign to your country, whether it's, we get something from China or Thailand, or they get something from English, that they may overdub it, but the lips always don't match. But using deep fake technology, they can make the lips match what the AI is using with these voices. And you can use the real actor voices to do the overdub because it's AI, and then get the deep fake to make the lips match.
Interesting.
I'm like, now see, that's a useful application. And I said, what we really could get now is we could get the 4th and 5th year of the Enterprise with the actors and their voices, get the deep fake and the AI going to do some more original Star Trek, but without new people. I'm like, is that good or bad? That's a tough thing to think about, really.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there was the using Peter Cushing's image in Star Wars.
Rogue One.
Was it Rogue One, right? So there's some controversy there, as was the young Carrie Fisher at the end of the movie, right?
Yeah, and then Luke in the Mandalorian and stuff.
Yeah, and so far they all look pretty bad to me, but
I watched Rogue One the other night, and I thought Tarkin looked better than I remembered. So maybe I'm just getting used to seeing this more.
He just looked too floaty to me, like he was, right? But Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, looked really, really, just looked awkward and tacked on. It just really stood out.
But that was like 6-7 years ago already. So the technology has advanced since then. So who knows
to the Luke level in The Mandalorian, which is, I would have preferred that they got a new actor to have played Luke, but I was rooting for Sebastian Stan.
That's what a lot of people were. Yeah.
And I don't care that he doesn't look exactly the person. Like, I think that would have been great to have somebody of that caliber in there being a real actor. And then you could actually make like whole new adventures with, without being all CGI,
Yes. And, it's a little bit of a personal thing. And, a lot of it's probably what the actors feel, but really when they sign up for that, they're signing over basically all rights, and the company can go, yeah, we're getting a new actor, we're doing CGI, we're using your likeness. Too bad. Maybe they get royalties, but they don't necessarily have the choice, at least with our books and stuff. But that'd be cool too, is to be able to use the AI, the deep fakes and the voices and stuff that, like for my books, middle grade, I could create a cartoon and have a cartoon created, which is very, very cost prohibitive to do something like that. But if I could do it in my budget, I think that'd be awesome to be able to release that for my readers. So it's like any technology. There's evil and bad. It's how it's used.
Well, there's such a gradation too. So like, you look at the CGI that they do for like Toy Story or A Bug's Life or any of these, Pixar movies, right? So I mean, somebody came up with that stuff, and that's like, so they're not real, right? And it's also not, and even like the animated stuff that Disney does, like no one's there with like a pen and a pencil anymore. It's all, so like there's that extreme all the way to like you just tell an AI what to do. So like, somewhere, I mean, this stuff are going to get easier to use as they get better and more powerful.
We definitely live in interesting times, and I think that's been said through all ages.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right, well, Roland, anything else before we sign out for today and see what brings up in the future?
I think that's it. We've talked about some stuff you shouldn't do, some good news, and some stuff that make you think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sir, I appreciate it. It's good to see your face this new year and talk to you again. So I will be in touch in a couple of weeks, and we'll get back on.
Great. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year, Steve.
You too. Happy New Year. Okay. So let's do a little author talk. And I got to ask you about your Wide to Kindle Unlimited here in a minute. Let me ask you this, though. You're on your 4th book. What have you learned that you're doing different now than what you did at the beginning?
Well, the very first thing I learned was that for me, it doesn't work for everybody. For me, I never write anything if I don't actually sit down and write. Okay. So when I first thought maybe I'd write, I thought to myself, okay, what will I write about? What will I decided I'm going to write a book, what it'll be about, and absolutely nothing came into my head. And this had been kind of going around in my head for weeks. And then I heard Maeve Binchy. Do you know Maeve Binchy?
Yeah.
I heard Maeve Binchy interviewed, and she said, I'd never write anything if I didn't sit down at my desk and write from 9 to 5 every day. I've never done 9 to 5. My stamina isn't that strong. But then I sat down and started writing, and I was amazed to discover that like words just came to me.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I know a lot of people talk about writer's block, and you mentioned earlier about getting ideas. I love when people say, well, where do you get your ideas? It's like, where don't I get my ideas? I'm driving down the road and I get 3 ideas. I'm sitting here writing this book and I get an idea for this other book. It just, once you start that creative juices going, it seems to not stop. I'm working on a Christmas story for my kids, and I've been doing that almost every year. And I was like, okay, it's gonna be like all the others. Oh, it's gonna be a short little story, and now we're up to like 7,000 words, and it's still going. So I agree. It just kind of keeps going.
Yeah. No, I don't get writer's block. I probably get the opposite. I write a lot of crap.
Writer's flood.
Maybe that's it. I write a whole load of stuff, and then I go back and I think, nah, that's useless. I have to get rid of that. But I've often listened to Lee Child being interviewed. And I heard Lee Child, and he said he never deletes anything. He said, because I'm a writer, not a deleter, right? And I tried that. Once he said it, I thought, yeah, I waste too much time writing stuff that I later throw away and don't use. I said, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to have a plot. But I think about a week later, I'd written a page. That was as far as it got. Like, I just can't work that way. I just have to keep writing and see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to talk about writing plot here in a couple minutes, more of a discussion. But yeah, I know a lot of, everybody has to kind of come to their own way of doing it. And sometimes you have to try and experiment other ways. And that's where I've gotten. I mean, like I said, this Christmas story I'm working on now, without even realizing it, it kind of started off as an almost dialogue only story where it was very little everything else, but the stories seem to flow really well. And now I'm adding in the other stuff. I've never wanted to write that way. It just kind of happened. I know a buddy of mine, Jay Thorne, talks about doing that all the time. He'll write the whole book as just basically dialogue and then go back and fill the rest in. And it's actually working quite well for me this time. So I'm like, oh, okay, we'll go with it.
That's interesting because I don't generally do that. I generally tend to write like page by page till I get to the end. But I had to change something and go back and add something into my most recent book. And I found it incredibly confusing. Like when I kept getting mixed up as to what was happening and where I was in it and all the rest. And then when I got to the end and I sent it off to my editor and I had this big reveal, and she, at the end of one chapter, she said, "You said that already." I thought, "Oh my God, I did." I mentioned it 3 times earlier without meaning to.
So I got a few other questions. Let's talk a little bit about our discussion on plot since we're here already. Okay. What software do you use to write?
Word. I know
Word.
Nobody does that. And nobody does that, but I've used Word all my working life. I'm very comfortable with it.
Actually, I'd probably say a good 70 to 80% of the writers I talk to use Word.
Do they? Everybody I hear use Scrivener.
I was just going to say, and this isn't a dig or anything to anybody, most of the authors I talk to are newer. Actually having 4 books puts you at the higher end of professionalism for my podcast. No dig against anybody. It's just the focus is new authors, unknown authors, people you haven't heard of. But that's not to say that more professional authors use other stuff. I personally like Scrivener because of exactly what you were just saying. I'm a database programmer by trade. So very analytical type thing. And I realized with Word that it's all one big long thing. And oh, wait, if I want to change or move something, it's just cumbersome. Whereas Scrivener, I kind of put things on a cork board with little synopsis and I can move them around. And then I go into it and I write the details. So we were going to talk about plot, and that kind of fits right in. I don't do a big outline. I generally have an idea of the plot. How do you handle plot?
Well, I did look at Scrivener when I started. I got the free version and I looked at it and I thought, by the time I've learned that, I'll have written the whole book. I'm not. So, and also because I don't plot. I don't think I need it. I mean, the odd time I think it would be handy because I wouldn't make the mistake I made there in that book. But generally speaking, I feel I don't plot, and I think Scrivener sounds like it's perfect for plotters, but I'm not a plotter. My book generally goes straight through to the end, so I find Word is fine. But no, I don't plot. Usually, when I start a book, I know who the murderer is. I know who the victim is. Most of the time, I know why they did it. I didn't actually in one book. But most of the time I know why they did it. But that's it. Then I just start writing. So what I do is I start writing it. And when I start to write it, I see it in my head, like I'm watching a movie. So okay. then characters just start doing things and I write them.
and I think the Christmas story I'm working on, one of the reasons I think the dialogue type of beginning and why it's flowing so easily is because I have all the characters in my head pictured very well, and they're all distinct. And I have a firm grasp. It's almost like they really exist. And I'm just kind of sketching what they're actually saying and doing. It's like played out in your head. And again, I know J.D. Barker talks all the time working with Patterson about intricate plot details, outlines, where, each chapter is, here's all the things going on in the chapter outlined out. And then here's the sub things and everything is, 50 pages of outline before you even write the book. I'm like more away from that. I get an idea and I even using Scrivener, I'll say, here's a scene, here's a scene, here's a scene. And then I fill it all in and it expands and it changes and that. So like we said earlier, I think authors really need to try these and figure out what works best for them, not just, oh, that's how so-and-so does it, so that's how I'm going to do it, even if it's not best for them.
Exactly. And when I started, I got really caught up in this whole plot thing. People say you have to have a an idea where you have your peaks and your, you know, what you call those things? I can't think of the word for them. But you know, they you're supposed to write to this. Now the word's
Like
gone.
the 3-act structure with the
Exactly. That's what
rising action and
exactly. I mean, I worried myself sick about that because I couldn't figure out like how the hell did I do this? And then I wrote when I'd written my book and I sent it off to my developmental editor. And she said to me, because I give up, I just thought I'm not even worrying about that. So I sent it off to her, and she said to me, now you've got quite a good grasp of structure. And I said, I have absolutely no grasp of structure. I don't understand it at all. And she said, well, for some people, it comes naturally because they've picked it up from reading.
I was going to ask you that. Do you mostly, or have you mostly read psychological thrillers throughout your life that it's just like part of you now?
Well, no, I've read throughout my life, but I haven't always read psychological thrillers. I'd
Okay.
say I was kind of like 30, I think. Well, I mean, I read my very first Agatha Christie when I was a teenager, but like reading lots of them, I don't think I started doing that till I was nearly 30.
Okay. All right. And maybe this is why I don't write well in that genre, because honestly, I cannot get into Agatha Christie. I've read a couple of stories and I'm like, okay, I've read enough. I read the big popular ones and I'm like, yeah, she doesn't thrill me.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, like, you know, different things throw you. I mean, I actually wrote an article about that recently about the very first Agatha Christie book I ever read. And it was called, let me see, if I had if I had the article now, I'd be able to remember its name. The Man in the Brown Suit. That was it,
Okay.
right? So I'd been going through my tortured romantic phase at that stage. And I went into my grandmother's house one day and she found these books at the end, at back of a cupboard, and she gave them to me. And one of them was this, and it was written in 1927. So it was like, it was not a modern book, but it was about this girl whose father dies and she's left on her own at a time when women weren't really supposed to, you know, be doing much on their own. And she decides she's going off to South Africa. And I just thought it was such a lovely book. I mean, it was a bit of a romance that she got to do all these amazing things as opposed to the women I've been reading about who spend most of the time dying in factories and waiting for men to come and save them before they drop down dead of starvation. And I just thought it was like a breath of fresh air.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think the books and authors we read when we're younger make the impact and the imprint on us. And a lot of what we do later stays close to that. I still pick up Stephen King and will read him. And even if I've read, sometimes it's like, man, I really feel like reading that again. I think that's the same way. But I will say, I read Murder on the Orient Express and I went, oh, now I see where the 500 derivative movies and books that use this similar plot came from. She came up with this first.
She was the first one to do that. So that was very unique at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, if nothing else, I can say, yes, I have read Agatha Christie. So, I'm not missing one of the classic authors.
Well, you're doing better than me. I haven't read Stephen King. I have seen his movies, but I've never read him.
Oh, well, there aren't too many movies that are that good with his stuff. I appreciate some of them at some level, but a lot of his books, I mean, one of my top 3 favorite books of all time is The Shining. I've probably
Really,
read
I've
it.
seen the movie, never read the book. Yeah.
I do not like the Kubrick movie that well, even though everybody loves it. There's actually a TV mini series that was on in the early 90s based on The Shining, and I thought it was much more accurate to the book and a better movie watching experience than the Kubrick movie. So each of their own, I guess.
Yeah. Well, maybe someday I'll read it, but I'm not really a horror person, to be honest. I don't like gore. It kind of gets to me.
Well, a lot of his more modern books aren't even really horror. They just touch upon a little supernatural, maybe. It's the early ones that have the best horror in it. So,
yeah.
um,
Carrie was his.
do what? Sorry.
Was Carrie not his?
Yes, that was his first one.
Yeah,
And
blood all over the place. I remember. Yeah.
yeah, that one I didn't care for a whole lot. It was a shorter, thinner story, but the Salem's Lot, The Shining, Dead Zone, Cujo, Misery, Those were
Oh, I
all.
saw Misery. I saw the movie Misery.
That's one of the good movies. So I like that one. Kathy Bates is wonderful in it. So
Very
is
good.
Steve Kahn. So, or James Kahn. Sorry. Okay. So besides BookBub, how are you marketing your books?
Oh, well, apart from BookBub, I don't really do all that much. I do different things. I started off doing Facebook ads, but what I found was I got sales from Facebook ads, but they cost me about as much as I was spending on the thing, so I dropped them. I do Amazon, but I don't find it very successful. What I do is I put my book in it's late here, my brain isn't working properly. What do you call those things where you reduce your book to 99 cents?
Oh, like some sale, some,
Like the
Amazon
big
sale.
ones, like free Booksy, those
Oh,
kind of.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
So I do one of my books there about a week before my new book comes out. And then I do my new book. And then after my new book comes out, about 3 months later, I apply for a good BookBub deal. And so far, that's worked for me. If BookBub ever stopped working for me, I'm going to have to go with a different model.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned on the last half, was you go wide and then you essentially pull it down and just put it in Kindle Unlimited. Whereas a lot of times I hear authors saying they go in Kindle Unlimited first and then they go out wide. So why do you do it the way you do it?
Because I want to do BookBub. So if you do, BookBub won't really consider your book if it's in Kindle Unlimited. They do some big people, but it would be very difficult to get a feature deal if your book was in Kindle Unlimited. So I figure by not having it in Kindle Unlimited and not having had any big sales in it before, that means it does better when it goes on a BookBub deal,
Okay.
right? So again, everything I do is built around this feature deal, which I may not even get.
Right. Okay. And so how long do you leave them? Like, I assume Apple and Google and Kobo, or maybe, wherever else. How long do you leave them there? And do you have good sales and then you see it decline? Is that when you pull it out, or how's that work?
I don't find that I have that great sales there. I do well when I do the BookBub deal, but apart from that, I don't find it does very well. I just want them there so that if anything ever happens, like they're all up, and if anything ever happens to Amazon, like they decide to close down my account or something, it would only take me a second to get them all live again somewhere else. So, but I leave them there for the year because that's like I do promos. Even when I do promos, I think promos work better if you have more places that you can sell your book. So I leave them there for the promos, and then I'll do a promo, say like the week before my new book comes out, and then when my promo is done, I put it back into Kindle Unlimited, and I have my new book wide.
Okay. Interesting. Well, that's definitely good to hear that you're having success doing it a little different than a lot of other people do it. So for all the authors listening, like we said, with plotting and writing and software, sometimes you got to find what works best for you and know why you're doing things instead of just, well, that's how so-and-so does it.
Yeah, well, I mean, people have told me it's not a very bright way to do it. They say you're relying on a book club deal you might never get, which is true. But so far, I've been lucky. So for me, it works at the moment. It may stop working.
Do
Yeah.
you find you've got people that have read your first couple books and now they want the next one? So you're getting people ordering it because they've read it, they know it, and it's building up through all of these couple years?
Well, I've a lot. Well, I have people on Instagram who have followed me and read all of my books like from the beginning. So I have some people like that who are very good. Like they'd be saying, like I send out my newsletter and they say, "Oh, I'm so looking forward to your new book."
Nice. Okay. All right. So let me ask you, Val, before we close things up, if a new author comes up to you and asks, do you have any advice? I'm just starting out. What would you tell them?
Don't have very high expectations.
Wow. Okay.
Have patience. It takes a long time.
Okay. Great. And let me ask another question before we get going. You write the psychological thrillers. Have you thought of trying any other genre, or you just want to keep going with what you have?
Well, as I said, I'm going to write. I'm going to write a time traveler thriller, which is slightly different at some
Yeah.
stage. I always thought what I'd love to do, but I mean, I don't think I'll ever do it because I don't think I have the time. But I always thought what I'd love to do is write a version of Pride and Prejudice from somebody else's point of view. I've always loved Pride and Prejudice. It's one of my favorite books. So I was that I'd like to do that from the point of view of one of the minor characters, but that would be an awful lot of work because I'd have to figure out how people lived then, how people spoke then, would take probably too much work.
That does sound like it would be some work, but if you love it, it does make
I absolutely adore that book. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put some links on that as one of your favorite books. Great.
But it's very different from what I write.
Yeah. Well, my reading is way different from what I write. So, all right. Well, Val, I appreciate you getting on chatting with me today. I'm glad we got our tech problems worked out so we can get on.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate that because I was having nightmares about that tech.
Oh, no, we got you covered. You're good. It's all good. So I wish you luck and I appreciate you taking some time. Thank you.
Thank you for talking to me and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too, even though the episode probably won't come out till after Christmas. But
okay, well then Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, so I was just gonna add that. Yeah, Happy New Year. Happy Valentine's Day. It'll be before Valentine's Day. So
have a good summer, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Val.
Okay, take care, Stephen. Bye.
Bye. Hi, if you enjoyed this episode of Discovered Wordsmiths, please support the author. Go to their website, go to Amazon, look them up, get the book. And if you click on the link that I have in the show notes, you'll also help support the podcast so I can keep the hosting and all the software I use and keep it running to help more authors. When I am recording this, we've got over 100 episodes, lots of authors. Go to the website, discoveredwordsmiths.com. Check it out. There's a lot of great authors, probably in some genre that you love. See what they have. Check out their books. That's what the point of the podcast is for. So people can discover new authors, find some new books they love, support the authors so they can continue writing. So please support them. And if you do like the podcast, if you've been thinking of podcasting or you're a writer, I've got some links also at the website. Click on those if you're interested in any of the software or services that I talk about. Everything that I have there is something I use, so I've got an affiliate link. Again, it's a little bit, if everyone clicked on those, if they were going to get it anyway, it helps keep the podcast going. So let's all help each other out and discover more authors to read.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.